Okay, we are live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement progress to bring power to the people. With us today, we have Chris Armitage. He's a candidate in Washington's 5th District. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm following in the footsteps of some incredible guests you've had.
Well, thank you very much. And we are going to have so many great guests, but you are the great guest today. And so we want to learn a little bit more about yourself. What was your background, or what are you still doing while you've been campaigning for office? And frankly, what led you to be inspired to try and go for this congressional run this year?
Well, I've had a little bit of an interesting journey. I was in the Air Force, served 2 enlistments. I deployed to the Middle East on 2 non-combat deployments as a base defense operations controller in air-based defense. I also worked as a first responder and 911 operator while I was active duty. As a staff sergeant, I earned my master's of science in Homeland Security, and I left that really great resume and I said, I'm going to do stand-up comedy. And so, yeah, I'd been doing stand-up for years. I mean, I'm not a physically, giant person. I'm 5'4", 5'3", and so my whole life I've used humor to handle things. And that, in the first responder world, that was part of how I coped in 911 operator work and deployments. It made me feel good to make other people feel good. So I left the military and decided I just spent 7 years building a heck of a resume for one type of career path, but I'm going to do what I really want to do. And then 14 months ago, I just looked at the state of the country and I said, I can't sit on the sidelines. I feel like everybody's got to do what they can. And, I spent a lot of time criticizing people who've run for this seat before, the person who holds this seat. And I remember when I was Staff Sergeant Armitage and one of my troops would complain about someone above me or me, I'd say, go take their job and do a better job, or find out that they did that way for a reason, and then you eat crow. And so I'm here to walk the walk because I think I can do it better, and because I think probably most people watching this could do it better.
Yeah, honestly, it does feel like that. If you just had a random sampling of Americans, we might be even in a better place now than the electoral process. But, I really do like that approach. Frankly, that's a large inspiration for why we have the Hill of Roses in the first place. We saw a lot of complaining out there, not a lot of organizing to get some access to the movement and drive people down ballot. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your specific district. There's people from all over the country, but I think they should understand where you're coming from in your part of Washington. Can you let people know a little bit more about Washington's 5th District and its characteristics and some of its key issues?
Yeah, I think it was Tip O'Neill who said all politics is local. I see a lot of people out there trying to be the next AOC, and they don't do the work to learn about their district. And so that's something from the beginning I've really tried to dig into. So our district, Washington's 5th Congressional District, is 25% bigger geographically than the state of New Jersey. And the whole state of New Jersey. It's a large state. I get very car sick, and before COVID, we were driving. I've been to 25 towns across this district. It's about a 5.5, 6-hour drive from the top of the district to the bottom. And it's an incredible, a lot of huge rural community, huge farming communities. We have 10 counties that encompass our district. 65% of our population is in one of those 10 counties, Spokane, which is the second largest city in Washington State. We got a lot of dry land wheat. We have a lentil festival that's pretty amazing. Had to miss out on that this year. And so, our district has very diverse economic needs. We also have a few sizable reservations and indigenous population centers. And so being able to address these economic diversity with one candidate isn't an easy thing to do. But for most establishment folks, because they always have those competing interests. Who's giving me the most money? I guess that's who I'm going to have to pretend I really support. The fortunate thing is here, when you're an unbought candidate and you approach a district like Washington's 5th, you can sit with the farmers, you can sit with your indigenous community, you can tackle issues like dams that we have out here, where the farmers are getting over 1 million acres of crops are actually irrigated from one dam in particular, the Ice Arbor Dam. But also we have wild salmon populations that we need to protect that is actually codified in treaties we made with our native populations out here. So that's the meat and potatoes of real politicking, and that's Washington's 5th Congressional District.
Very nice. And so I have to ask, with this kind of diversity of both, rural communities that have had this farming as well as, fishing experience, as well as this urban center, what have been the central issues of your campaign that you've been trying to solve for the 5th District that kind of unites both groups? What would you say are your top 3 to 5 policies that you're trying to champion in your campaign?
Well, healthcare, housing, and jobs get to the root of it. I've been to very small towns that have warming shelters and areas for homeless folks to get food and clean their clothes. And that's not something that you expect to see as much of when you visit a town of a few thousand people. And so, whether it's Walla Walla, whether it's Colville, whether it's Republic, whether it's Spokane, there are people who are working multiple jobs and can't afford housing. There are people who, 20% of people with schizophrenia live on the streets. That's a healthcare problem. It's a housing problem. They're very intersectional. And then quality employment. These 3 things, healthcare, housing, and jobs, are at the root of the diseases of despair and economic turmoil that we're experiencing right now as a society. I think our district is representative of the larger challenges that America is going through, because we have, from the second largest city to this farmland to reservations, it's very diverse. So, making sure that we're not the only first world country where kids die from insulin rationing, because I've met folks who deal with that. I met people who they lost the family farm or the family business because their wife or husband or kid got cancer. Those all relate to each other. We need good paying jobs, we need affordable housing, and we need universal health care.
So I just want to have some clarification on some of those top issues that you're trying to address. I'll start with jobs. In your mind, is it coming in the forms of a jobs guarantee? Is it a jobs program? And furthermore, what do you think the solution is for so many people who don't have jobs, as we've been seeing lately in these COVID times where it's harder to get people into physical locations to work? What do you think is the solution in terms of jobs?
I saw something interesting, and I've I had entrepreneurial ventures, tried to start my own businesses, those kind of things. And so I've had a little bit of that experience as well that helps inform my feelings related to work. And fact is, the universal basic income is something that would mean that people could start businesses and not be unable to feed themselves or their families, keep roofs over their head. That would help the marketplace. That would increase competition, which means better products for the consumers, ideally. So I'm a supporter of the universal basic income. I'm also a supporter of a federal jobs guarantee. I was lucky enough a few days ago, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts and did an episode about the Black Panthers. And actually the Black Panthers advocated for a UBI and a federal jobs guarantee. Yeah. And so I think those are 2 really straightforward moves. We have so much crumbling infrastructure in this country that could really help with the underemployment as well as the unemployment. The last census had our district at 10% unemployment. That was the last test for this whole district. 1/3 of the population under the poverty line, 2/3 of our students in public schools on reduced or free lunch in many areas across this district. Underemployment, 94% of the net job growth over the last 2 years has been Uber, Lyft, gig economy jobs. And so I think, federal jobs guarantee to just tackle crumbling infrastructure and universal basic income so that nobody has to choose between working or dying. Those seem like 2 pretty direct approaches.
Okay. And I do like that you are trying to have a dual approach to this. Here's a job for anyone who is trying to want a job, as well as if you cannot work a job, you still have that support. Or if you're not looking to do necessarily this government-based job, you have that freedom to be able to say no. Can you explain to some folks why you take the position of a federal jobs guarantee compared to a jobs program?
If you want a job, you should be able to get one. And that's really the straightforward thing about it. It should be a guarantee. It should be a promise that you can have gainful employment. The fact that conservatives aren't jumping all over this tells me that they're not, leaders in conservative groups aren't actually in it for the substantive ideological reasons they claim to be. Because what could be more classically conservative than just saying, if you want to work, let's get you to work. And so a guarantee is a promise to the American public that we're going to be able to get you a job if you want one, because there's plenty of work to do.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. So just now to clarify your position for healthcare, what is your position on single payer versus a public option? Where are you on those lines?
I'd rather see single payer. I think it's the most efficient model we could have. I wouldn't vote against multi-payer. And I don't say that I don't take big pharma money. They're not lying in my pockets. It's just a fact that I'm not going to get in the way of a solution when it's better than nothing. I used to have I had someone I used to work for who said the best answer is the right answer, the second best answer is the wrong answer, and the worst answer is no answer. I'd rather take a wrong answer or a half right answer than no answer.
It's an interesting approach. And I do think that's in general pretty pragmatic. I think, frankly, it's a lot easier to sell people on single payer once we have even more people already on Medicare. It makes the transition period that, frankly, is the big red herring for a lot of these groups opposing single payer, make them a lot more comfortable just because we have an increased enrollment already. I think the last thing I wanted to clarify. Go ahead.
No, when you look at decreasing the age that we start delivering Medicare at, something that's so frustrating about that system is you just say, okay, we're going to cover everybody who's over 50 instead of everybody. Well, okay, great. So people are still uninsured in their teens, 20s, 30s, and 40s, and those injuries just get to rack up until it's on the government time. Invest in preventative care. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This country has lost sight of that. It's all on the 2 and 4 year cycles. And so, that's what we're addressing here, is actually trying to be stop being as a nation penny wise and pound foolish, and actually invest in our future. And that's what Medicare for All is.
Yeah, I do like that approach in general. One of the few tweaks I've always proposed for Medicare for All is that everyone should get it baseline up front. There's a 4-year transition period with an age phase in. Everyone should have it up front, but the preventative, no duplicative coverage should apply in that age phase in model. That's how I see you get healthcare to people the quickest, so you don't have to wait a 4-year period just so you can have the elimination happen at the same time as transition to the Medicare model. But I generally like the approach of ending up at single payer, and frankly, it's just all about the transition plan in the end. I'm curious of what you think that way we can actually transition is. Obviously, there's people who are already working within that industry. How do you figure that we can help those individuals in the transition?
Well, that's where the federal jobs guarantee becomes necessary. It's not just about giving people training and hoping the free market takes care of it. The military is the largest consumer and one of the largest employers on earth. And that's the government employing people, putting them to work, giving them free college, giving them universal single payer healthcare, giving them trade skills that they're going to use for the rest of their life. I just want to extrapolate that out. I know people who are disabled who don't have the option to join the military. Why shouldn't they have the opportunity to gain valuable skills, years of a living wage, guaranteed housing, universal single payer health care, and tuition-free college?
Yeah, that makes sense. Frankly, as of late, when I've been having these conversations on the federal jobs guarantee, and we even had a debate recently, one of the most persuasive arguments I've heard on that cause is that we already have a federal jobs guarantee. It's called the military. So it's essentially anyone who wants to be able to get employed to rebuild their communities here domestically should have a similar recourse of action for them. So I wanted to clarify the last pillar that you had brought up, housing. I think a lot of housing solutions in most people's minds are local solutions. That's who at the end of the day has control over zoning. They have control over whether we want rent control on that. What do you think can be done from the national level to support housing towards those local communities?
Just seize the means of production. No, I'm just kidding. I had to stop myself from laughing. I wanted to say that so bad the whole time. No. Local solutions are very important. We're gonna, I really want to make it so that right now, most of the people who hold elected office, they own property, and the donor class owns property. That's a major store of wealth. They actually have a disincentive to make affordable living. Yeah. I'm not a fan of renting. I've never gotten a deposit back, no matter how much you clean the place. That's true. Things are terrible. It's I can barely afford to live here. How am I going to afford to take you to court because of this or that's broken and you won't do anything about it? That's the reality. And you're just throwing away equity too. Like I said, I'm not taking money from some big housing organizations. Most of my donors are renters as well, like I am. And but I think you should be able to own property. And again, back to that Black Panthers podcast episode from Stuff You Should Know was on my mind. That was something they were fighting for too. They actually wanted people to get 40 acres. And I want you to be able to have land that is yours. I like some individualism. I like some liberty in there. And so, you should have an opportunity of self-determination. You shouldn't have to live in a space that is contractually owned by someone else. And so the solutions for that, it's going to be making sure that we actually, take maybe some innovative methods. And I'd really like to research how other countries are approaching it. But one idea that I like is back to the military. The military had dorms and base housing there's a lot of houses in our community here in Spokane that used to be base housing, and then the base just shrunk their housing, and now they're out on the market and they're great homes. I lived in the dorms myself. So I want not just low income, but government housing that is there, one, to make a more equitable market, and two, it's public option housing. How about we call it that? I want some public option airlines. I want some public option housing, and it's not for profit.
I like that, frankly. I had a similar conversation with my own parents on this idea. They had jokingly called it actually barracks for all. Like, there should be a baseline subsistent kind of communal housing that everyone should have some access to. It's not something that you necessarily want to like stay forever. It can be, but it's not necessarily high end. This is basic housing levels, because frankly, we right now have less homeless people than we do vacant houses. We should be able to match people up and rebuild our existing supply in addition to creating more of an affordable supply. And so, Chris, I think a lot of these things are very bold and are actually going to be able to help people. But I think the problem that we have is a lot of the times we don't know how to actually do the politics behind the movement. We have a lot of this policy. We have a lot of these ideas that are going to help people. But what do we do to actually start getting some of this stuff done? Let's say you're able to win your race. What are you trying to do when you get to the inside to start trying to pass some of these things?
I'm going to do everything I can to be a diplomat. And that's a great question, by the way. I appreciate it because I think that's where a lot of people are lacking. Your ideas being superior isn't what's going to win things or save the world or guarantee a better future. We need to outmaneuver fascism. We need to outmaneuver tyranny. And they're investing a lot of money and time and resources and focus grouping into how to defeat progress. And so, really addressing these things, getting it done diplomatically is going to be about coalition building. Are you creating a public discourse that's going to lose people elections if they don't support what you're on for? But more importantly, and this is something I don't really hear a lot of talk about, is your work down ballot. Now, there's folks who claim to support certain policies, and then at the state level, they're a U.S. representative or a senator. Then at the state level, they don't support organizations or state representatives who are fighting for those exact things, like, say, single payer or, a lot of different policies. It could be a ton of them. And so, I hope to gain support from anybody who's out there, because my opponent receives $5 million every cycle from the worst of the worst, because they can count on my opponent to be a rubber stamp for terrible policies. But I'm going to be putting in the work down ballot. I'm going to be there. I don't care if you're running for dog catcher. I don't care if you're running for school board. I'm there for you if you're in it for the right reasons. And then at a local city, state level, tribal level, whatever I can do to help out, we're going to enact these policies that are amazing. And we're going to get proof tests, and we're going to get people on board because they say, you know what, I didn't think it was a good idea, but now I like it. You can see that with ranked choice voting. That's made some good progress. And even even universal healthcare in Canada started in Saskatchewan, I believe. They did it province by province. So we got to put the work in down ballot. It's not all glamorous. Are you showing up for the people who can get it done at your city council?
Yeah, frankly, I think that is so important. I think that's exactly the right approach when it comes to, the recruiting process to get more voices into the fold. The best way you get support to run for federal office is having that support already built at the local and state level too. So it kind of is like a mutually beneficial relationship. You have to have the federal government supporting the down ballot so that the down ballot eventually can support more people getting into the federal level as well. I'm curious, in your opinion, when it comes to like figuring out people that you want to build a coalition around, how do you try to kind of, it's maybe you call it a litmus test, maybe you don't, but if you're in a position of power where you want to endorse people, how do you try to evaluate if they belong in your coalition?
Well, it makes for interesting bedfellows, I think. But to me, the main things I care about are they espousing sincerely held beliefs? How corruptible do they seem? Fact is, I'm actually friends with a good number of libertarians who are pretty active at the state level. The Koch brothers tried their best, and the remaining Koch brothers still tries to take over that party with authoritarian leanings. But I know plenty of libertarians who are lefty libertarians. Mm-hmm. And we've built some interesting little coalitions and have agreed to do some, we've at different points, we've done little Q&As together and that kind of stuff. And I went on Larry Sharp's podcast. He's a vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. And so I want to build coalitions with people I disagree with too, as long as they're in it for the right reasons, as long as they're not corrupt, as long as they're not bought. That's how we move it forward. We can't just demand that people agree with us and expect that's going to figure it out. Fact is, there's people who I agree with who I don't think should have my vote. I would rather vote for someone I disagree with, who I think is honest, sincere, unbought, and actually looking for the right solutions, maybe willing to admit that they were wrong. And I think that's how we move forward as a country. Our system was created as inherently adversarial, but also with a team orientation, just like in the courts of law in our country. It's an adversarial process, but the ultimate goal is justice.
Yeah, no, I think that does make sense. There is definitely a balance between like the leadership style of being just truly genuine and you can rely on where they are going to stand because they're a very principled individual compared to the policy. So I do think that is a very key balance to be struck. The last thing that I wanted to ask you before I open things, we have a lot of our progressives were aligned behind the Bernies of the world, the Andrew Yangs of the world, but we ended up with Joe Biden as the nominee. How do you approach and talk with your peers to say how we should be approaching handling Joe Biden?
I do my best not to even get involved in the presidential level. I've just seen that, especially with a district like ours, I get asked by people who I hope to represent, "Are you going to support our president?" And they're talking about Donald Trump. And I get asked by people, "Are you going to get rid of Donald Trump?" And all these different things. And I let them know, look, if there was a Washington's 5th congressional district party, that'd be my party. I think no president could become tyrannical without a complicit Congress, and no president could solve all our problems without a helpful Congress. And so I think for too long, executive overreach has continued to grow at an exponential rate. And a lot of it was actually well-intentioned. I think a lot of our presidents became president and made all these promises and then realized that the only way they could try and get some of those things accomplished was by increasing the powers of the presidency in a very unconstitutional way, in a way that our founders really didn't intend. And so I hope to reduce the power. I don't think half the country should ever be scared of the other half holding the presidency. I think that, it's just not going to happen by me getting involved with Biden or Trump or Bernie or Yang. If folks want to help us win this race, great. But fact is, if something's going to benefit working class people anywhere, even worldwide, that's my priority, no matter who it aligns me with.
I think Tip O'Neill would be proud of that answer for keeping it local there. But let's now go to some of the audience questions. So far, I've been getting a lot of questions on your economic platform. The first one here by an Evil Penguin Bob. This is, he asked specifically, is the federal jobs guarantee this? But I'd like to just broaden it a little bit. What does the federal jobs guarantee look like in terms of the jobs that would be offered, and who would try and determine those jobs?
I think we'd really want to grow it out in a similar way, a mixture between modern military logistics and organization and the Civilian Conservation Corps of the New Deal and a few other New Deal organizations. Keeping our communities clean, keeping them, we have all these bridges in Washington State, I know, and I've seen them in other places like New York and Pennsylvania when I visit family over there, and they're crumbling, they're falling apart. Our rail infrastructure in this country, a federal jobs guarantee means we suddenly have the staff and the budget to do incredible things, lead the world once again. And I think that's when our country really takes off and leads in a new era of economic, moral leadership that also includes quality of life leadership.
Mhm.
And so, of course, keeping parks clean, working on climate change, but also finding innovation. I mean, why couldn't the federal jobs guarantee include people who are researching innovative new ways to transport goods? I'm a huge rail fan. I'm probably you might hear me go back to that again. My dad actually was a conductor for a little bit. He was with UTU. I think he worked for Norfolk Southern. Gosh, I hate flying, and I just want to take 3 weeks to travel across the country and have Wi-Fi the whole time to work remotely. Right? So we could be investing in all these different amazing, innovative things. The obstacle is the way. Climate change is the solution to jobs and all these different things. When we look at the challenges we face, they can solve the things that are holding humanity back.
Yeah, no, I do like that approach, frankly, saying problems are our opportunities. I think we've seen that kind of in this crisis. We had a way we could be doing something new. We didn't exactly rise to the challenge in a lot of ways, but I do think your point there stands very well. Let's go to the next question that we got here. This is broadly, why do you support UBI? You answered this beforehand. So I wanted to ask more specifically, how would you want to see a universal basic income structured? The amount that you'd want, who would be receiving it, how it would be funded. What do those types of things look like to you?
I actually first got interested in the UBI when I was looking into Social Security expansions and Nixon's negative income tax, which not a lot of people know. Nixon nearly implemented a negative income tax, which was essentially a basic income for people who make less than a certain amount below the poverty line. And they did a study and they found that divorces increased. And so they killed it because they said it was anti-family when really
it's freedom.
Women were able to leave abusive relationships finally. Yeah. But I'll give him credit for considering the idea. And if I wish the study had worked out, well, I don't know. It's tough to say. But anyway, you know what? I think I think it's the government legislating your morality for them to say you deserve to starve if you're not working hard enough. If you can't find a good enough job, if you don't grab those bootstraps, you should starve to death. That's garbage. And there's people who have children. You know what? You could be the laziest person. I'm not going to be obsessed with getting our government to find some jackbooted way to make you work.
Yeah.
No. You deserve dignity. You deserve respect. Congratulations on being an American. Congratulations on being a human. Get a roof. Get some food. That's the future we should be aiming towards. And one day, and Andrew Yang was the first candidate I ever heard address this, and I was really happy he did. We may enter a future where 10% unemployment is the max we're able to have because of automation. What are we going to pay people to turn a wheel all day for no reason? No. You know what? There might be a future where the vast majority of Americans don't need a job. Our economy is able to run. The cost of production is so low that we don't need jobs. And everything we do, you go to school, you self-educate, trust fund babies. If the government had to be obsessed with making us work hard, then trust fund babies what reason would they ever have to do anything? But no, many people who are born into wealth still manage to start companies and go to school. They could just sit on boats their whole life. Instead of just being a poor person their whole life, they could do that. So that whole idea, this whole mentality of we better, it's the government's job to make sure you work hard. It's garbage. That's why I support UBI. Everybody gets it, at least $1,000 a month. Congrats on being an American. Here's your share of the wealth.
That makes a lot of sense. And, I love that you still answered Justin's question, but I just wanted to follow up on what I had asked in terms of the structuring. How much do you think is that level that should be the baseline that everyone should receive? Who should be getting it, in your opinion? Like, what's that universality? Should there be any limitations? And is there any specific taxation methods you'd want to use to fund something like this?
All right, I might need your help walking me through the ones I forget because I wasn't trying to dodge it, but I was just going on a tear.
I love the
universal. There's actually the gentleman who owns the building that we rent our office at. He's a Republican, but we have some great conversations. And he said, "Are you okay with Trump getting a stimulus check?" And the same question would go for UBI. And I was like, yeah, because here's the thing. We end up spending way more money trying to keep it out of some people's hands than it would cost to give it to everybody. Many social programs, which I don't support getting rid of at all, but many social programs end up giving people $1,000 drug test to stop them from getting a $200 payout when 1% of the cases end up testing positive, and when they don't test, it ends up being the same when randomly sampled. There's you end up spending more money trying to decide who doesn't deserve something than you would to just give it to everybody. It's pragmatic. It's fiscally conservative. It's human. And you know what? We shouldn't just conserve capital. We should also conserve human life. That's really being conservative. We should conserve land. So you completely universal, at least $1,000 a month. I think it's a good start. It's a good baseline. I know most people can't live on that, but it's something. I think we shouldn't, not do something just because it's not perfect right off the bat. And like I said, right answer is the best answer. Second best answer is the wrong answer. Worst answer is no answer. We shouldn't be so risk averse that we never grow, we never develop. As far as the tax structure, right now, with what we're doing on corporate subsidies, with what we're doing on corporate socialism, the way we wage these forever wars. I mean, in a single morning, we did an airstrike on Syria where we dropped $100 million worth of bombs. We have these, we spend tens of billions of dollars on fighter jets that never get made with no deadline. We just keep throwing money at them. We need to end the fraud, waste, and abuse. We need to audit the Fed. We need to end the Patriot Act or abolish Patriot Act. We need to return to the tax rates of the Kennedy era. And that was when we were fiscally responsible. That was when we were doing all right. Go to those tax rates. And that's how we pay for it.
Yeah, no, I generally like that approach because, frankly, even in its base form, if you said there was nothing funding it whatsoever, MMT style, just stimulus spending to it, that's still going to be a redistributive model that is going to support people being able to survive. Even the frank inflationary impacts that some people claim with the proposal, who gets that impact? People that already have wealth. That dollar becoming worth less a little bit is coming from the people that already have wealth. So if you have nothing, you had $0, you don't care about the inflation because you still gained net money. So I think that whole approach of sometimes the funding is almost a distraction, but I do like that you're trying to aim at some of the efficiencies that we are currently lacking. This next question I have comes from similar person, Evil Penguin Bob. He wants to know, if the military can drink beer, should they be able to smoke? I wanted to kind of also qualify this same idea with the federal jobs guarantee. Like, what should be these disqualifying things from these like near guarantees of jobs? Obviously, the military is a little stricter, mind you.
I'm pro cannabis. I mean, I'd really like to. I don't know. I hope this isn't a cop-out answer, but I'd rather leave it up to the military leaders to decide what's good in order and discipline for their folks to the greatest degree possible. But no, I think consuming cannabis is safe. I don't think it weakens your ability to perform a job. There's a lot of important in-demand jobs right now that they can't properly staff because of cannabis testing. So I wouldn't stop it. If that bill was brought up, I'd support it to let military folks consume cannabis. I think the worst thing that I've ever seen happen with cannabis is just eating way too many snacks, just like painfully full. Pop Rocks on a McDouble, that's a bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some unwise food consumption patterns, but no, I genuinely agree with that. So let's take it outside the military for a moment for the idea of federal jobs. So, this is asking specifically about drug use, but what do you think are the limitations on someone not being able to work that guaranteed job? Essentially, if they're misconducting in the workplace, they're just not doing the job, they're not showing up, should they be able to be removed from that job, or should they keep it because they're guaranteed a job?
No, I think it's important to have rehabilitative programs and programs for, ensuring good order and discipline in any work environment. And again, I'm just using that terminology because that's, the job I've had mostly in my life was working for the military. But there was a joke in the Soviet Union, they pretend to pay us, we pretend to work. And so we got to make sure that people are held accountable and people are responsible, but also when you treat people with the assumption that they're going to be lazy or going to do a poor job, it negatively impacts their morale and makes them more likely to make those mistakes or do those negative things. What would be great? Why don't we invest some money into leadership, into productivity, into work-life balance? Why isn't our government investing in? Because that's part of the role, I think, of a federal government, is to do the things that aren't going to make you money in the short term or maybe ever, but might improve the general welfare. So why don't we invest in how to have healthy, happy, productive, effective humans in this country?
Yeah, no, that definitely is where the investment should go. And frankly, I'd love to see us transition to even less work days. I think, frankly, we did that back, oh, what was it, in like the early 1900s. We finally transitioned and gave ourselves a weekend. This was like a new concept relatively in the grand scheme of human existence, having any time off. And so we should be using these gains in productivity for ourselves compared to just generating more profits for the top. But, Chris, thank you for answering both my questions as well as my audience's today. If they enjoyed your answer and want to be able to support your campaign more, how can they get involved in your campaign and be able to support?
Well, I just want to mention, too, I support a 4-day work week.
Okay.
They already implemented it in a few countries. I know France has it. So just to put that out there. Now, where can people find out about me and our campaign and help us win? Because when this campaign wins, the American public wins, because we have one more voice in Congress that's ready to fight for the people. You can check us out on armitageforcongress.com, ARMITAGEFOR Congress.com. You can also check out Act Blue, Chris Armitage. Follow me on Twitter. All our social media handles are Armitage 2020 or Armitage WA 2020, Armitage WA 2020. Pretty easy to find. And this only happens if we decide that we care enough, because evil has some deep pockets.
Yeah.
And so if everybody who hates their healthcare has been hurt by the healthcare system, everybody who has suffered, when you contribute to a campaign, when you volunteer, when you decide to run yourself, when you decide to be stabbed, you're stopping innocent people from dying, whether it be from healthcare, whether it be from forever war, whether it be our own troops or innocent people being hit. There's a lot of things that you're taking an active role in. And I was at the BLM protest the other day, and I was telling people, you could be on Netflix right now. Netflix has some great, that Space Force show just came out.
Yeah.
I heard it's really funny. Steve Carell's back. You could be watching that right now. Instead, you're here trying to make the world a better place. And I think that's noble, and I think it's beautiful. And so I hope people here will decide to step up and not sit on the sidelines of history.
Yeah, I do agree with that notion. In one way or another, we do need to be investing in change, whether it be giving our time or giving our money or giving just our voice towards supporting a cause like yourself and so many other candidates around the country. So I do hope people that are listening to the stream go and support Chris's campaign. I support him in his race. That doesn't mean you have to, but I like what he had to say today, so I think you should too. So yes, go to armitageforcongress.com. You'll see that scrolling across the bottom of the page in case you don't know how to spell that. But Chris, thank you so much for being here again. Thank you, Rosebuds, for being here as well. I just want to let you all know just a little bit of a programming update. What we have this week, we're going to be interviewing more congressional candidates this week, because that's what we frankly think is going to be doing the most organizing effort that we need right now in our country, is getting more voices empowered and across the finish line so we have more representation finally. So tomorrow we're going to be speaking with Noelle Farmara. She's in Hawaii's 2nd District. Then we're going to be speaking with Robbie Goldstein on Thursday. He is representing, hopefully, the Massachusetts 8th District. That'll be on Thursday. And then on Friday, we're going to be speaking with Lindsey Boyland, a candidate in New York's 10th District. And finally, we're going to be having a long streaming event this Sunday, June 14th, where it's going to be roughly 10 hours in total, where we're going to be having a series of conversations with candidates, old and new, coming to the program to speak about how we can have, a 21st century people-powered government, something that's representative, something that's trustworthy, and most importantly, something that's efficient finally. So tune in for that. If you like today's video, make sure that you subscribe, and share this out so more people can hear Chris's message. Chris, once again, thank you so much for being here. And Rosebuds, I hope you all are staying safe out there as well. Stay rosy.